Thank you, Maggie, for that lovely introduction, and thank you all for coming along. So signage versus smartphones. What I wanted to talk about was the field that I work in and the changes that are happening in that field at the moment, and this is sort of the key driver, and this is really, for me, a series of questions really than any concrete answers and exploration. So I've structured it in sort of 4 sections: why we're looking at this topic, what's happening in the field around the world, why is it happening, and what does it mean for wayfinding. So why am I looking at this topic? Frost, where I work, has been working in spatial design for 25 years, and I've been in the field for about 10 years. And the work that we do is in 3 broad categories. What we traditionally call wayfinding, which is identification, directional, toilet signage, that kind of thing. Environmental graphics, which is it's interpreting the brand in a space and interpreting key messaging in a space. And in this case, it's a sustainability feedback loop for CBA that gives you information that enables you to change your behaviour and have an impact. And the other type of work we do is placemaking, which is kind of in a similar territory to public art, in that it creates a sense of place or it leverages an existing sense of place. And what we've noticed over the past few years is really that the core offer, which was wayfinding, is slowly moving towards us being engaged more and more for environmental graphics and placemaking projects. And I wanted to focus today on placemaking and have a look at why that's happening. So what's happening in wayfinding generally? The big shift is from the you are here model of where you are in relation to the landscape to a much more user-centric model, which is about where is your destination in relation to where you are. There's been a evolution from the GPS model. We're following dots on a map, to Google's satellite views, and now to the much more detailed flyover view in Apple Maps, which is an incredibly detailed representation of our actual environment. There's also a big rise in the use of hybrid mapping, which is a combination of 2D and 3D, and you can see from the little example in Legible London that is where we start to pulling out landmarks and the definition of places that are easily recognisable in 3D, so we can make the connection easily. Also the rise of personal journey apps, which mean that we can create our own journeys, save them, socialise them, and actually we're travelling through spaces in a way that's personal to us and not the way that the site defines the highway or the main route through the site. Real-time apps have seen the introduction of time as a new dimension in wayfinding, and this is particularly critical in this example, which is from Heathrow, so time-critical environments like airports. And there's also, as an extension of that, apps like Magnificent, where time is actually the key parameter in your decision making. So it's not distance, it's not location, but time is driving your decisions. Why is this evolution happening? Obviously there's a huge developments in the technology that's making this all possible, but at the same time we have increased understanding of user behaviour and also an opening up of fields like environmental psychology, which help us understand why people behave how they do in locations. I love this quote. What says men's suits better than a giant photo of a man in a suit? And I think there's something here that relates exactly to why we use pictograms so much, because they transcend language barriers. So if you see a toilet pictogram, you know exactly what's in there. It doesn't matter what background you're from. Also, this quote introduces the idea of landmarks in a way that a sign saying men's suits could never communicate what's happening in a way that the photo does. And you can see in placemaking, Frost have worked on this information kiosk down in Chinatown, and what could say Chinatown more eloquently than a Chinese lantern rather than a kiosk with a "i" on top of it. I'll just give you a minute to read that. So this is another lovely quote, and what it's referring to is the fact that there are existing relationships and links existing in all sites, and if we can tap into that pre-existing network of links, our wayfinding will be much stronger than if we are trying to overlay on top of that. And the example that I've used here is my neighbourhood. So this is the El Alamein fountain in King's Cross and the Coke sign, which is being changed over in that photo. But I really define that site by those two landmarks, and I would direct anyone by those two landmarks, and they are much more powerful than me saying, oh, I don't even know what the cross street is near the fountain, but I use the landmarks to talk about those sites. Landmarks have this function that they're able to give us long-term goals, so we can look up from our phones and enjoy the journey. So rather than a GPS model where we know one street, turn, and we're continuously focusing on the journey, once we have the landmark, which is the Coke sign, we can relax for that point up to the Coke sign and then make a decision. So and this is critical also in retail environments. You're much more free to absorb your environment and not be focused on the journey. These are two examples which are going up as we speak on Broadway, and it's the DCM building for UTS and the Jean Nouvel building for Central Park. And what they will do effectively is communicate that the gateway to the CBD has expanded in a way that a sign couldn't possibly do that work, but these two buildings will do the work. And I think that we've all come across situations where this is the case, that a really cluttered and dense environment, if you took some of the signage out, would be a lot clearer, and placemaking can help you do some of that work. There's this was a laneway installation as part of, I think, Art and About last year, but the city is also working on these. There's the birdcage laneway in the city, and they're very effective ways to define a space and help you navigate to that space and around that space without having to remember a street sign or a street name, which there are multiples of. These are unique. So what does this mean for wayfinding? This is the key, I guess, takeout. And what it really means is we're seeing less and less reliance on traditional wayfinding signage. I'll go through the three, the legible environments, landmarks and intuitive wayfinding through examples. This is Halo, which is one of the key sculptural pieces in Central Park. And with intuitive wayfinding, it's really about the whole experience, so how every element in that zone starts to contribute to the wayfinding rather than relying on a sequence of signs. And public art, by its prominence, is actually defining that space in probably a more powerful way than the actual parklands there are doing. But the heritage building, the public art and the parklands in combination are all giving you a sense of destination, which signage really can't compete with. Legible environments. Creating legible environments is about creating environments that the user can read and comprehend easily. And this is an example down at 1 Bligh Street, which was a collaboration between Engenhoven and locally architects. So there's a James Angus piece in the centre, there's the mesh curtain and also the green walls out the back. And together, all of those elements define the ground plane, give you some differentiation between the different topography of the site as it wraps around the corner, and also address each street entry differently. So the architecture and the public art and the placemaking have all worked together to create differentiation between the different entries without having to sign them. And I love this one. So landmarks. Landmarks is about situating memorable pieces at key decision points. And this was at the top of the hall to the Great Stair at UTS. And it's just really lovely in the way that it's celebratory, temporary, and very legible, and much more effective than a totem would be, or a temporary sign would be in that situation. The journey can start anywhere. So traditionally the journey started once we reached the site. Now we're starting the journeys off-site. We're starting them online, via apps, by a phone conversation, a conversation with a friend. And really the new wayfinding has to span that whole journey, not just focus on the signage once we get to the site. What that also means is that you can start your personal journey wherever you want. So in the case of Westfield, the option is for you to start the journey where Westfield, where you enter the Westfield, or to start the journey by looking up a particular tenant within Westfield. And doing that means that you're engaging with the site in a totally different way. Your journey is completely unique to you, and you can actually enter by a different route, bypassing a lot of what Westfield intend you to see. Multi-channel approach. So different users respond to different types of information, the way information is delivered in different ways. So contemporary wayfinding really needs to address that by providing the information in different ways. And the example that I've used here is the first one outside Sydney, but they do it so well. It's the State Library of Queensland, and they have a landmark building. It's landscape architecture. It's integrated into a landmark precinct, cultural precinct. They do all sorts of interesting things with the building. There's a lighting installation, a physical poetry installation. The wayfinding split, so there's on-site wayfinding. There's also an app for, I think it's 8 to 12-year-olds, which is off-site wayfinding, and then combined into them discovering the building when they get there. And they've been so successful making this a landmark that there's actually people getting married there as well, which I thought was very cute. So essentially, there are many ways into different sites for many different users, and we are starting. Wayfinding needs to now expand to accommodate that and talk to all those different users and the way they're coming to the sites. And the last thing I wanted to touch on is what is the baseline? So what is the physical signage that will still remain on sites? Of course, there's issues around smartphone take-up, particularly in Australia. There are time-critical environments like airports where you will always need physical signage just to eliminate any kind of time-related error. And there are some journeys which are never going to be personal, they're always universal journeys, which brings us back to where we started with toilet signage. Thank you.